Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Veronica and I am an ISTP. So I married an INTJ about a year ago and I wanted to make just a video about things I've observed about my INTJ husband. So I made a list of 10 things, but it's kind of hard to summarize a person in just 10 labels. So I'm using it more as a framework, and then as I think of other things, maybe I'll add them. Let's see, the first thing is that he is very organized. So let's see, so like his closet, all of his shirts are hung up. He also doesn't have a lot of variety, just like Henley's in different colors, and then he has a stack of shorts and then a couple jeans, and he just picks the top one off the stack, and he always puts everything back into the hamper. And then even his socks, he has like a left and a right sock. They're always perfectly paired. All of his other stuff too, super organized. He really likes when there's a system for everything, so he likes every single object to have a place that it's supposed to go, so nothing is ambiguous, nothing is just like stuffed in a drawer. He doesn't like those things. And in his mind, he thinks that he's very efficient. And it's not that he's not efficient, but he believes that having everything like meticulously organized is how you can be efficient. From my perspective, I see sometimes like this over-organization to be inefficient, because if a system takes too much effort to maintain, then it's not efficient because it's hard to keep it going. But in his mind, it's efficient. So, and maybe that's just because it's easy to find things that he thinks it's efficient, whereas I'm looking at it's hard to put away things, so it's inefficient. But yeah. Number 2 is that he is very sarcastic. So he's kind of jokes around a lot. Like half of what he says is at least mildly sarcastic. This works for me because I'm also sarcastic, so it doesn't bother me at all. Also, he has a hard time genuinely expressing like positive feelings towards someone. And so if he's trying to say something nice to you, he probably will pretend he's being sarcastic while saying the nice thing. So you're like not sure if it's genuine or if it's sarcasm, but it's just because he's like feels awkward about genuinely like saying something nice to someone. Number 3 is that he is off in his head a lot. And for him, I'm sure this isn't true of all INTJs, but for him, when he is off in his head, he's usually pacing. So he will walk back and forth in a room for like an hour or two, just thinking about things. And I don't know what he's thinking about, because if I ask him, he like immediately loses his train of thought and he can't tell me what he was thinking about. And this used to really drive me crazy to see him just like walking back and forth constantly. But eventually I got used to it. It doesn't even like faze me at all anymore. Even sometimes, this isn't all the time, but sometimes if we're like eating dinner at the table, he will walk in circles around the table, and then every time he gets to his plate, he'll take a bite to eat, because that just like, I don't know, I think it just helps him think, and he just like gets off in his fantasy land of exciting thoughts and he doesn't want to stop. Number 4 is that he's a doer. And by this, I don't mean that he's constantly doing things, because he's not. He definitely likes his time to just go off in his head. He likes his time to just be chill and be by himself. But when there's things that need to be done, he is very efficient. He just gets right to the point. He does it. He doesn't deliberate about it for a long time. He's pretty good about doing like mundane daily life tasks, like the mail, bills, keeping things organized, like pretty much everything that I find to be like extremely painful and tedious to do. He's really great at staying on top of those things and doing them. Number 5 is that he isn't that private about his emotions, but he's also not very emotional. So he very rarely feels or knows that he's feeling, I don't know which it is, significant emotion. But the few times that he does feel a lot of emotion, he isn't ashamed of it at all. So some examples of that, I remember a while ago, he was with my family and he was talking about what themes in movies make him cry, and like totally open about the specific kinds of things that make him cry in a movie. To me, that's like appalling. Why would you reveal that information about yourself? But he's like no shame about it at all. Another example, I just had a baby recently, and right after I gave birth, he like cried for an hour. I think it's because everything leading up to birth was so stressful that once I gave birth, he just kind of like lost it in his emotions. And then he went and told everyone that he had cried for an hour. Again, something that I wouldn't myself feel comfortable admitting, but he has absolutely no shame about the emotions he does experience. Right, number 8 is that he gets very bored in social situations, unless of course the conversation is very intellectually stimulating for him or related to something he's extremely interested in. And he's also not fake at all, and so when he's bored, he acts bored. Like, you know that he's checking out. He'll even like fall asleep. But if he's interested, he acts very interested. So you know what you're getting, you know, he doesn't put on a pretense. He isn't really trying to make people feel better about themselves. He's just honest with you, honest in his reactions. Number 9 is that he is not very comfortable with conjecture. And so I kind of mean that both in the area of like any kinds of theories. So like either theories about people, what's going on in different situations, or just more intellectual theories. I think I am pretty comfortable, and not actually that comfortable. I'm kind of in a middle ground. I am more comfortable than him with like coming up with new ideas or theories, or being like, I bet this person is feeling this way, and so then they're thinking this, and I'll like come up with theories in that kind of sense. Whereas he's very uncomfortable with that unless something is backed by hard evidence and fact, and you can point him to all the studies or all the facts. He is likely not going to just get on board with whatever you're thinking. He also never comes up with those kinds of theories himself. And lastly, number 10 is that he lives by long-term ideals. And so I didn't want to say that he's always doing planning, because he does do a lot of planning on the long term. And by long term, I mean like, we're talking like 100 years even. So like he's planning about the future of his children and their children, and what he can do to ensure them a better life. And so like for him, like getting married and having kids was all part of like his long-term ideals and plan. But he's really bad with the short-term planning. Okay, that's kind of true, kind of not true. I'm thinking of things like what he's gonna eat. He never thinks about that. He usually forgets to eat, actually, unless I am there to remind him and provide food for him, or otherwise he just will not eat. So yeah, like things like that, like basic everyday needs, he doesn't plan well and think about. But like I said before, he is good with like mundane tasks like bills and stuff like that. So he's good about like having a plan to get those things done. So I'm not really sure, actually. Maybe there's just certain things he values that he's good at planning short term, but a lot of things he's not. But he definitely lives by very long-term ideals, and that can be very helpful. But sometimes it's also not grounded in reality, and I'm like listening to all these fantasies in his head about the future, and I'm like, you know, I think it's gonna be a lot more complicated than that, you know, in reality. But sometimes he just gets so excited about these long-term plans that doesn't really care about what's really gonna happen, or he doesn't really perceive what's really gonna happen. But it's also good, because if it wasn't for him having these long-term ideals and plans, we wouldn't get anywhere in life, you know? Sometimes you just have to take action. Oh, and that reminds me, I didn't mention this yet. He is very good at taking action with things, and sometimes even before I think he thinks everything through, because in his head it makes perfect sense, but sometimes it's not really grounded in reality, and so there's like things he didn't perceive, and so mistakes end up being made. But his attitude is that it's like a net win, because he thinks that either he takes action right away and he gets the good thing out of it that he intended, or if it ends up being a mistake, then he learns about that. And he is very good about learning from his mistakes, but he's a lot better about learning from his mistakes than learning through, like, if I present being like, hey, I think this is in reality what's going to happen in this situation, if it doesn't like click in his brain, he's like very slow to even believe it's legitimate until he does it himself and fails, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, it didn't work. So yeah, that's all I've got. If you know any INTJs, or if you are an INTJ, I do read all the comments, even though I'm terrible at responding to them. But I appreciate all the comments. Leave a comment, let me know, if you relate to any of these things, or if you have other things that you notice about INTJs in your life. So thanks for watching.